The air in our small suburban home had grown thin and heavy, like the moments before a storm. For weeks, Mark had been walking around like a ghost in his own life, his shoulders perpetually slumped, the easy laugh I'd fallen in love with replaced by a permanent, weary sigh. He was an architect, a man who built dreams from concrete and steel, but lately, it felt like the foundation of our own life was crumbling beneath our feet. I tried to be the support beam he needed, making his favorite meals, keeping the house a calm sanctuary, and swallowing my own anxieties so they wouldn't add to his burden. I told myself this was what marriage was, weathering the storms together, even when the wind howled so loudly you couldn't hear yourself think. Tonight, the storm finally broke. He came home long after the sun had set, dropping his briefcase by the door with a thud that echoed through the silent house. He didn't kiss me or even meet my eyes. He just walked into the living room and sank into his armchair, burying his face in his hands. I followed, my heart a tight knot in my chest. "Mark, what is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked up, and the despair in his eyes was so raw it stole my breath. "It's over, Sarah," he said, his voice cracking. "The firm. We lost the Henderson contract. It was our last hope. We're deep in debt, the creditors are calling, and I don't know how we're going to keep the house." Each word was a blow, landing with a physical force that made me weak. Our house. The one we'd bought with trembling hands and hopeful hearts. The one where we'd painted the walls a soft sage green and planted a garden in the backyard. The thought of losing it felt like losing a part of myself. "No," I whispered, kneeling beside his chair. "There has to be something we can do. We can sell my car. We can cut back on everything." He shook his head, a bitter, hollow sound escaping his lips. "It's not enough. We're talking about tens of thousands, Sarah. It's a mountain we can't climb." He looked so broken, so utterly defeated, that my own fear was eclipsed by a fierce, protective love. I would not let him drown. I would not let us drown. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of his words pressing down on us. My mind raced, frantically searching for a lifeline, a hidden reserve, anything that could pull us back from the edge. And then my eyes landed on the small velvet-lined box on my dresser, visible through the open bedroom door. Inside lay my grandmother's jewelry, a delicate diamond necklace and a matching set of sapphire earrings. It wasn't just jewelry, it was my only real inheritance, a tangible piece of the woman who had raised me, her love and legacy captured in gold and gemstones. She'd told me to save it for a true emergency, for a day when hope was the only thing I had left. Looking at Mark's shattered expression, I knew that day had arrived. I didn't tell him my plan, not yet. I just squeezed his hand and said, "We'll find a way." "I promise." He looked at me, a flicker of something, gratitude maybe, or just sheer exhaustion, in his eyes. "I don't deserve you," he murmured, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a surrender than an embrace. As I held him, the cold weight of the decision I was about to make settled in my gut. I would sell it. I would sell a piece of my past to save our future. And in that moment, I believed it was the most selfless, loving thing I could possibly do. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, the house still cloaked in a pre-dawn stillness. Mark was asleep on the couch, having refused to come to bed, as if the space between us had already become too wide to cross. I slipped out of the room, my movements silent and deliberate. In my bedroom, I opened the velvet box. The diamonds winked at me in the dim light, and the sapphires held the deep, endless blue of my grandmother's eyes. I remembered her hands, wrinkled and gentle, fastening the clasp around my neck on my wedding day. "This is for your forever, my love," she had whispered. "May it always bring you light." My hands trembled as I closed the lid. It felt like I was betraying her, trading her memory for mortgage payments. But what was a memory if the life it was meant to bless fell apart? I drove downtown to a small, discreet jeweler my grandmother had trusted for years, a place tucked away on a side street, far from the gleaming storefronts where Mark and I used to window shop for things we couldn't afford. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. An older man with kind, tired eyes looked up from behind a polishing cloth. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked. I placed the box on the glass countertop and opened it. He let out a low whistle of appreciation as he examined the pieces, his loupe pressed to his eye. He named a price. It was a fair one, more than I'd even hoped for, enough to cover the debts Mark had mentioned, and then some. It was a number that represented a lifeline. Yet, as he counted out the crisp $100 bills, each one felt like a piece of my history being torn away. I walked out of the shop feeling hollow, the weight of the cash in my purse a poor substitute for the heirlooms that had warmed my skin for years. When I got home, Mark was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. He looked up as I entered, his face etched with the same defeat as the night before. I didn't say a word. I just walked over, opened my purse, and laid the stacks of cash on the table between us. His eyes widened, first in confusion, then in disbelief. "Sarah, where did you get this?" he stammered. "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my soul. "It's enough. It's more than enough. You can pay the creditors. We can save the house." He stared at the money, then at me. Tears welled in his eyes as he stood and pulled me into a fierce hug. "You saved us," he whispered into my hair, his body shaking with what I took to be overwhelming relief. "You saved me. I swear, I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you, Sarah. Our problems are over." I closed my eyes, clinging to him, to the hope his words offered. The sacrifice ached, but in that moment, listening to his promises, I thought it was worth it. I had traded my grandmother's light for our future, and for one hopeful night, I believed that future was finally secure. The following afternoon, the house felt lighter. The oppressive weight of dread had lifted, replaced by a fragile, tentative optimism. Mark had left early that morning, taking the cash with him, promising to go straight to the bank and make things right. He'd called me at noon, his voice buoyant for the first time in months. "It's done, babe," he'd said. "So I'm meeting with a few people to finalize the restructuring. This is the start of our comeback." I spent the day cleaning, letting sunlight stream through the windows, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. I was making a simple dinner, pasta with a sauce I'd learned from my grandmother, when I heard it. A low, throaty rumble that grew louder until it vibrated through the floorboards. It was the sound of a powerful engine, the kind you heard in movies, not on our quiet suburban street. Curious, I wiped my hands on a dish towel and peered out the kitchen window. My heart stopped. A sleek black sports car, so new its paint gleamed like polished obsidian, was pulling into our driveway. It was a machine built for speed and status, a symbol of everything we weren't. For a horrifying second, I thought it was a creditor, someone coming to repossess what little we had left. Then, the driver's side door swung open, and Mark stepped out. He wasn't the broken man I had held just 24 hours ago. Stepped out. He was beaming, his posture confident, his face lit up with a triumphant, possessive pride. He ran a hand over the car's hood, admiring it, before turning and striding toward the house. I met him at the door, my mind a maelstrom of confusion. "Mark? What is that?" I asked, gesturing toward the impossible vehicle parked where our sensible sedan should be. "Isn't she a beauty?" he crowed, sweeping past me into the house. He didn't seem to notice the shock on my face. "It's a C8 Corvette, 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. I got a hell of a deal on it." I stood frozen in the doorway, the smell of garlic and tomatoes from the kitchen suddenly nauseating. The world tilted on its axis. The numbers didn't add up. The desperate debts, the threat of foreclosure, the cash from my grandmother's heirlooms, and this extravagant, six-figure monument to deceit. "A deal?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Mark, we're broke. You told me we were about to lose everything." He finally turned to look at me, his smile faltering slightly as he registered my expression. He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Oh, that. Don't worry about that anymore. I told you, I landed a huge deal. The new contract came through this morning. Our problems are officially over." He tossed his keys onto the counter with a clatter that sounded like shattering glass. He spoke of it so casually, as if this new reality seamlessly erased the one he'd presented last night. But my mind was already connecting the dots, drawing a straight, undeniable line from the cash I'd given him to the car in our driveway. The timelines were too close, the reversal of fortune too sudden. It wasn't a miracle, it was a lie. I stared at him, at the man I had sacrificed a piece of my soul for, and I saw a stranger wearing my husband's face, a stranger who had just bragged about his success while the ashes of my sacrifice were still warm. The silence in the kitchen was thick and suffocating, broken only by the gentle simmer of the pasta sauce on the stove. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, a frantic rhythm against the chilling calm that was settling over me. "The contract came through this morning?" I asked, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion churning inside me. Mark nodded, already heading to the fridge to grab a beer, completely oblivious to the abyss that had just opened up between us. "Yeah, out of the blue. Total game changer. I was meeting with the investors all day to celebrate. We're back, Sarah, better than ever." He popped the cap off the bottle and took a long swallow, a gesture of pure, unadulterated triumph. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the counter. "Where did you get the money for that car, Mark?" He turned, an annoyed look crossing his face. "I told you the deal. It came with a signing bonus. Don't you listen?" His condescension was the spark that lit the fuse. "No," I said, my voice gaining an icy edge. "You listen. Last night, you told me we were ruined. You let me believe we were going to be homeless. And to save us, to save you, I went to a jeweler this morning." His eyes flickered. He knew what was coming. "I sold my grandmother's jewelry, Mark. The necklace, the earrings, all of it. I gave you every single dollar." The color drained from his face. For a moment, he looked genuinely stunned, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Anger. He slammed the beer bottle down on the counter. "You did what?" he roared, and suddenly, he was the victim. "Why the hell would you do something so impulsive without talking to me? I had a plan. I was working on this deal. You just couldn't trust me, could you? You always have to try and fix things yourself." The gaslighting was so immediate, so masterful, it was almost impressive. He was twisting my sacrifice into a flaw, my love into a lack of faith. He was making me the villain of a story he wrote. "A plan?" I shot back, my own voice rising to meet his. "Your plan was to let me cry myself to sleep, thinking we were losing our home while you were out shopping for a sports car. The money I gave you, that was for the creditors you said were hounding us." He scoffed, turning away from me to pace the room. "That was a worst-case scenario. Things are complicated, Sarah. You wouldn't understand. Worst-case scenario. I wasn't struggling. I was reallocating assets for a new venture, a silent partnership. I couldn't tell you about it until it was finalized." He was throwing business jargon at me like a shield, trying to hide behind a wall of corporate nonsense. But a crack had appeared in his story, and I pushed. "A new venture? With who? Who are these silent partners you were celebrating with?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. "Just some guys from the firm. Ben and Peterson." The names meant nothing to me. But then he added, "And Chloe. She's the lead investor." Chloe, his old college friend, the one whose texts he always deleted, the one he claimed was just a friend, even when my gut screamed otherwise. The blood in my veins turned to ice. This wasn't about a business deal. This was about a different life he was building, one that didn't include me. Mark stormed out of the house after our fight, peeling out of the driveway in his new car with a squeal of tires that felt like a final, insolent laugh. He yelled something about needing space, about how I'd ruined the best day of his life with my drama. The house fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was the charged, electric quiet of a crime scene. The naive, loving wife who had sold her heritage for a lie was gone. In her place was a woman with a cold, burning clarity. He thought I was impulsive. He was about to find out I was methodical. I went straight to his home office, a room I rarely entered. It was his space, cluttered with blueprints, design magazines, and the faint, familiar scent of his cologne. I sat down in his chair and turned on the computer. It was password protected, but after a decade of marriage, I knew his secrets. His mother's birthday, the date we met, the name of his childhood dog. It was the dog. The screen flickered to life, granting me access to the digital life he thought was hidden. My hands were steady as I started to dig. I wasn't looking for an apology, I was looking for the truth. I started with the bank statements. Our joint account was dangerously low, just as he'd claimed. But then I found it. A separate account, one I'd never seen before, opened 3 months ago. The transaction history read like a diary of his deceit. There were no payments to creditors. Instead, there were charges for lavish dinners at downtown restaurants I'd only ever read about. There were receipts from high-end clothing stores for items that weren't in his closet. There were hotel bookings, not for business trips, but for weekend getaways to coastal inns, booked for two. My heart hammered against my ribs, each discovery another nail in the coffin of our marriage. Then I opened his email. It didn't take long. In a folder labeled Projects, I found a thread with the subject line Our Future. The recipient was Chloe. I clicked it open, and my world imploded. They weren't just emails about a business venture. They were love letters filled with shared jokes, intimate plans, and promises. He wrote about leaving me, about how he felt trapped in a life that no longer fits. He described me as sweet but simple, a woman who couldn't keep up with his ambition. And then, the final devastating blow. A message from just last week. I'm so close, Chloe. Just need one last cash injection to secure the new condo. I have a plan to get it. She'll never see it coming. Then it's just you and me. The money, my grandmother's money, it wasn't to save our house. It was to fund his escape, to build a new nest with her. The new venture was a lie. The silent partners were a lie. His entire performance of being a broken, struggling husband was a meticulously crafted act designed to manipulate me into financing my own replacement. I leaned back in his chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. There were no tears. The shock was too deep, the betrayal too absolute. It had bypassed sadness and gone straight to a cold, hard resolve. He had underestimated me. He had counted on me being the sweet, simple wife who would grieve and forgive. He had no idea I was about to become the architect of his downfall. I started taking screenshots, downloading files, and saving every last piece of his treachery to a hidden flash drive. My war had just begun. For the next week, I became the best actress of my life. When Mark came home, tail between his legs, and offering a half-hearted apology for overreacting, I accepted it with a quiet, wounded grace. I played the part of the wife who had been hurt by his anger, but was trying to understand his stress. I made his coffee in the morning. I asked about his day. I moved through our house like a ghost of the woman I used to be, and he, blinded by his own arrogance, bought every second of it. He thought my silence was submission. He had no idea it was strategy. While he was at work, celebrating his success with Chloe, I was meticulously building my case. The flash drive became my most prized possession. On it, I saved every email, every bank statement, every hotel confirmation. I created a precise timeline, a devastatingly clear narrative of his lies. The date the secret bank account was opened, the dates of his business trips, the date I sold my grandmother's jewelry, time-stamped on the jeweler's receipt, and the date he purchased the Corvette, just 3 hours later. It was an open and shut case of fraud, deceit, and emotional manipulation, and I held all the evidence. My next step was to find a lawyer. I didn't want the kind of attorney who specialized in amicable divorces. I wanted a shark. I found her online, Jessica Riley, a name that came up in local business articles, known for her sharp, no-nonsense approach to complex financial dissolutions. Her motto, printed on her website's homepage, was, "I don't fight battles. I win wars." I scheduled a consultation. Sitting in her sleek, minimalist office, I laid out my story, not with tears, but with a folder of neatly printed documents. I watched her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scan the papers. She didn't offer sympathy, she offered a plan. He thinks the house is his biggest asset, but his biggest liability is his arrogance, Jessica said, tapping a perfectly manicured finger on the printout of his email to Chloe. He's left a digital trail a mile wide. We won't just go for a standard divorce settlement. We'll pursue him for the money he fraudulently obtained from you and for punitive damages. She explained the legal strategy calmly and clearly. We would let him make the first move. We would let him believe he was in control. And then, when he was at his most confident, we would dismantle his entire world with undeniable facts. I went home that day feeling a strange sense of empowerment. The grief was still there, a hollow ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with a layer of cold, hard steel. I was no longer a victim of his story. I was the author of my own. That evening, Mark came home with a bouquet of cheap grocery store roses. "For you," he said, a placating smile on his face. "To say I'm sorry, I've been a jerk." I took them, arranged them in a vase, and smiled back. "Thank you, Mark. That's very sweet of you." He thought he was smoothing things over, paving the way for his eventual easy exit. He had no idea he was just handing more ammunition to the woman who was preparing to burn his new life to the ground. 2 weeks later, he made his move. He chose a Sunday evening, the time of the week when vulnerability hangs heavy in the air. He sat me down on the living room couch, the same spot where he had performed his monologue of financial ruin. This time, his tone was gentle, patronizing, as if he were a doctor about to deliver a difficult but necessary diagnosis. "Sarah," he began, taking my hand, "we need to be honest with each other. This isn't working anymore. We've grown apart." He said all the classic lines, the ones he probably rehearsed with Chloe. He talked about wanting different things in life, about how he would always care for me, but that he needed to be true to himself. I let him talk, nodding softly, my expression a carefully constructed mask of sorrow. Nodding soft, I was giving him enough rope to hang himself. "I think we should separate," he concluded. "And I want to be fair. The house is legally mine since it was in my name before we married, but I'll give you a small settlement. Enough to get you a new apartment, get you back on your feet." He named a figure so insultingly low it was laughable, a sum that wouldn't even cover the cost of the jewelry I had sold. He expected me to be grateful. He expected me to cry. He expected me to fold. Instead, I gently pulled my hand from his and stood up. I walked over to the bookshelf and retrieved a slim black folder. "I agree that we should separate, Mark," I said, my voice calm and even. "But I think we have different ideas of what's fair." I sat down opposite him and opened the folder on the coffee table. His smile faltered. He wasn't expecting this. One by one, I laid out the documents, narrating each one in a low, steady voice. "This is the receipt from the jeweler for the sale of my grandmother's heirlooms. It's dated and time-stamped. This is the confirmation of the wire transfer of that exact amount into your secret bank account, the one you opened 3 months ago." His face went pale. His confident posture dissolved. "And this," I continued, placing the final document on top, "is the invoice for a 2024 C8 Corvette, purchased in your name just 2 hours after my money hit your account." I paused, letting the silence stretch, watching the realization dawn in his raw eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, to lie, to deny, but I wasn't finished. I slid my phone across the table, an email thread open on the screen. The one with Chloe, the one titled Our Future. "And this is you," telling her you have a plan to get the last cash injection for your new condo. The one where you call me sweet but simple. The one where you promise her it's just you and her, as soon as you get rid of me. He stared at the screen, then at me, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. The charming architect, the confident businessman, the master manipulator. He was gone. In his place was just a small, cornered man who had been caught. "It's not what you think," he stammered, the words hollow and pathetic. "Oh, I think it's exactly what I think," I replied, leaning forward. "You committed fraud, Mark, and I have the proof. So here's my version of a fair settlement. We are getting a divorce. You will buy me out of my half of this house's current market value. You will repay the full amount from the jewelry, with interest, and you will sign whatever papers my lawyer puts in front of you without a fight. If you resist, even for a second, this entire folder goes to the district attorney, And I'm sure Chloe will love reading about her business partner in the local news. I stood up, leaving him there amidst the wreckage of his lies. The game was over. I had won. 6 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, a small but bright space overlooking the city. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and violet. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. Mark, stripped of his arrogance and faced with irrefutable proof, had folded completely. He'd signed everything Jessica put in front of him. He sold the Corvette to help pay the settlement, a fact that brought me a quiet, grim satisfaction. He bought me out of the house, and the check for my grandmother's jewelry, with interest, was safely in my savings account. I heard through the grapevine that he and Chloe did get their condo, but that their new venture was already showing signs of financial strain. Apparently, building a life on a foundation of lies wasn't as stable as he'd imagined. I didn't use the money to buy back the jewelry. I knew my grandmother would have understood. Her love wasn't in the gemstones. It was in the strength she had instilled in me, the strength to survive and rebuild. It was in the strength. Instead, I used a portion of it to start my own small business, a boutique landscape design firm, a passion I had put aside for years to support Mark's career. My first few clients were small, a backyard garden here, a rooftop terrace there, but the work was mine. Every flower I planted, every stone I laid, was a testament to my own resilience. I was building my own dreams now, from the ground up. I often thought about the woman I was before, the one who would have forgiven him, the one who measured her worth by her ability to keep a man happy. She felt like a stranger to me now, a character from a sad story I'd once read. The betrayal had been a fire that burned away my naivete, leaving something stronger and more authentic in its place. I learned that true self-worth isn't about sacrifice. It's about knowing when to stop sacrificing yourself for someone who sees you as a means to an end. That evening, as the city lights began to twinkle below, I held a warm mug of tea in my hands and felt a profound sense of peace. The hollow ache in my chest had finally filled, not with someone else's love, but with my own contentment. The heirloom jewelry was gone, but I had gained something far more precious in its place. I had lost a husband and a house, but I had found myself, and as I looked out at the endless expanse of the city, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my future was my own to design. I was no longer the support beam in someone else's crumbling structure. I was the architect of my own life,